Welcome back to another episode of Tell Me All About It. I'm here with a very, very special guest. My guest name is Adrianna. She is the Instagram holder and controller of everything New York. Not everything New York Giants fangirl, and the podcast host of Everything New York Giants. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Alrighty, we have a couple things in common. We're both Jersey girls. We both have a unhealthy love with the New York Giants, so I'm super excited about this interview.
And we're going to have a lot to talk about, that's for sure.
We do. All right. First things first, before we get into the team, as long as I remember, I've been a fan my whole life. The Giants have been known as this first class organization. What makes them a first class organization?
I think the biggest thing is the way that it's been run from the top down, starting with Wellington Mara, is the focus has always been on everyone is treated more like a family than just players. So that has been, Wellington Mara's pretty much slogan. And I think that John Mara and Steve Tisch have kind of made it their mission to continue to focus on that. And you hear a lot of players, both former and current, talk about how they're so close with each other and they do things together in the off season, and they really have this unbreakable bond. And I think that's what separates them from other organizations. And they are one of the few organizations who have been around for almost 100 years now, which is crazy.
That is. All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how horrible are those jerseys?
I will say when I saw them in person, I liked them a little bit more, but I mean, I give them like a 5. They're so not at all what I wanted them to be.
All righty. We've seen the Giants go through quite a few reconstructions over the last 10, 11 years now. We've seen Dave Gettleman, we see Jerry Reese, we've seen Pat Shermer, Joe Judge, Ben Mack. We've seen a bunch. Do we have this with Dayball and Schoen? Do we have a good combination going? Because we have a losing season and then we also have a playoff season with these two.
Yeah, I do have confidence in them, and I do think that they could be the right men for the job. There are things that I've seen from both of them that I really like the way they've handled situation and things like that. And then there's other things that I have my concerns about, but I think ultimately they are doing a good job at what they're supposed to be doing. And listen, they're not, our future partner for life. Like, I don't expect them to be perfect and make great decisions at all times and always get everything right. When you're talking about, drafting players and picking guys up in free agency, there's so much unknown. You can't always hit on every single player that you bring in. So I feel like the differences that we've seen in the way that Dave Gettleman has run things and the way that Joe Schoen has run things are night and day. So I do feel confident that he is doing a good job so far.
You talked about your concerns with this pairing. We all saw the meltdown of Martindale and Dayball go down. What are some of your concerns with this? Because it didn't end pretty.
Yeah. So my concern is with Dable and his coaching as a whole. I think overall he's a good coach, but there are things that I worry about. And the first thing is that the way that he behaved on the sidelines last year, and I'm okay with him being fiery. I'm okay, with him showing emotion on the side, but you have to rein it in. Like, that scene that took place with him throwing the tablet at Jones, like, you can't do that, especially knowing the way that the Giants were performing, that we are a New York team that has 50 more media members than literally every other organization. Like, I think he just has to be more aware of how he's perceived. And, there are some things that he can control and there are some things that he can't control. But the things that he can control is behaving on the sidelines. So I need him to get that under control. Same thing, there was another scenario that happened with Tyrod during the Bills game right before halftime. So, like, I need him to be better with that this year. And, he hasn't been great at clock management. And I'm worried that if he takes on play calling duties this year, which it's looking like he's going to do, that his time management skills might not improve because he's going to be focused on calling the plays and being involved in that type of thing too. So that makes me a little nervous.
I think it's great you put out those because I instantly go back to that Jets game. DeVito had to take realm, and I think the entire stadium wanted to erupt when he was like, "Why not pass the ball?" It was like the same play after play, and then the way he reacted to the media was just horrific, and you can't do that in New York. well, jersey.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I was at camp today and I'm watching all of the media members go by and I'm just like, there is at least 25 of them. Like there are so many more than probably majority of the NFL that I'm like, it's a tough market and it's not for everyone.
All right, let's get into Hard Knocks. I think the best thing that could have happened to New York Giants since last season was them doing Hard Knocks. Because as fans were like, do they see what we see? Are they not considering the pieces? And with this episode of Hard Knocks, we start to see that. We also start to see the minds of the front office. So do you think Hard Knocks was in favor of the Giants or in disfavor?
In my opinion, as a fan, and I'm trying not to be biased, I do feel like it's in favor of them because we have never seen any front office behind the scenes like this. So I think that fact that everyone who's an NFL fan gets to see how the trades go down, and obviously it's not all of it, but I think getting to see a little bit of the behind the scenes of all of that is awesome. And I love it. I do think though, like there are some things that, there's always going to be critics. I mean, my brother sent me a tweet today of someone saying that they can't believe that Dable had his legs up on the table when he was interviewing Rome Odunze, like, and that's a bad look. And I'm just like, what a stupid thing to tweet about. Like, I don't know. There's so many concerns with this team. The last thing I'm worried about is Dable acting casual in an interview with a potential former player, you know?
Yeah.
Just like it
Um,
doesn't bother me.
Episode 3 was probably my favorite episode because we got to see the process of free agency. We got to see how
Hmm.
players get played, why they're getting paid so much. Who do you think the Giants overpaid for?
Um, I mean, it's hard to tell because they haven't done much on the field yet. I do think that there is going to be a lot of chatter if Burns doesn't have a good year because he is getting paid a very high salary on top of us giving up 2 draft picks for him. So if he doesn't pan out, if he has a tough year, if he gets injured, there's going to be a lot of chatter that, oh, I can't believe the Giants paid X amount of money for him. I can't believe they gave up the draft picks on top of it, blah, blah, blah.
See, I think Drew Luck was too much. $5 million for Luck. That's
Mm.
way too much money. Um, it's gonna be the only Saquon question because I remember watching our live yesterday. You were kind of sick of the Saquon questions, so I only limited it to one. We saw Saquon how it went down. It didn't end pretty, and I think he just came out
Yeah.
saying he was bitter how he left.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that same season, when everyone's getting a contract, I mean, Daniel Jones 40 million, Andrew Thomas 23.5 million, Dexter Lawrence 21 million. Do you think the Giants shot themselves in the foot with these big contracts?
I don't think so because this is what I said to someone else lately when they said, I can't believe the Giants let their best player test free agency. Like if they really wanted to keep him, they wouldn't have done that. And I said, do you know who they didn't let test free agency? Are their 2 best players, which are Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. So I think with Thomas and Lawrence, I think they did it at the right time because Chris Jones got paid a ton of money. You're seeing now some of these other guys in the same positions get paid a lot of money. So I do feel like the Giants did it at the right time. And I think the same with Daniel Jones. Did they pay him a little bit too much? Probably. But ultimately, Trevor Lawrence, who has not performed significantly better than Daniel Jones and is getting paid 15 million dollars more per year. Like, you want to talk about an overpay? Trevor Lawrence better be leading the Jaguars into a deep playoff run this year because $55 million for him is absolutely insane.
Um, Another part of this, in episode 1, they talked about if Saquon leaves, who's the identity of the Giants?
Mhm.
Because we all know the offense is really the identity of the team. You got
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt who can get open, but we can't get him the ball.
Mhm.
Darius Slayton has never been the number one guy for me. Singletary is a great pickup, but he's not going to be he's not the person to win the game. Who is the person the Giants is going to have to say, you need to step up and be the offense? Because it can't always be the quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be Neighbors. I mean, outside of the offensive line, I think, especially watching Hard Knocks, you see how highly they talk about him and how, Dable says he's a baller, he's a game changer, etc. I think that he's going to be the focal point of this offense, like Justin Jefferson is to the Vikings. So I expect a big year out of him. I know that he's a rookie, and I know that, there's question marks around the offensive line, which I think is valid, unfortunately, for the 100th year in a row. But I do feel like Neighbors is going to be that guy. I think he's going to be a safety blanket for Jones. I think Jones is going to know I can always go to Neighbors, and he's going to be there, and he's going to be open.
All
I
right.
hope, at least.
I mean, he's a rookie. Every rookie has their growing pains. I mean, we saw Zay Flowers in that, I think it was a championship game,
Oh,
that big rookie mistake he made. I mean, that to me cost the game. So every rookie has their growing.
100%. Yeah,
Um,
I agree. Well,
Justin,
and we saw Jalen Hyatt last year too, where I think we all expected to see him every snap and, have 50 catches, and he wasn't really as involved as we thought. So I expect a big year out of him as well, but I do think that Neighbors will be the one who gets the bulk of the targets.
Daniel Jones, let's talk about him.
Okay.
2022, he got his big contract, 40 million, 4 year, 160 million. He only passed for 320 yards, I mean 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns with 700 yards rushing. Was that enough to earn the contract that he got? Because this is prior to Jaguars giving out the contract, Herbert at,
Right.
this is prior to, was that enough to give him the contract that he got?
I would say probably not. But what I will say is I don't think they only based it on that. Like when you hear Joe Shane talk about Jones and why they kept him, whatever, he led the team to a playoff win for the first time in a decade. He led 5 game-winning drives. So I think it's not just based around the numbers. I know that the stats are so important, but I would say that they probably gave him that contract based on those other things as well as just, whatever his numbers were not
As
that great.
someone, as someone who focuses on the Giants, why are they so invested in Jones? Because I mean, he's only finished one full season, only passed for 3,000 yards twice in his career, 46 interceptions, 40 fumbles. I mean, I'm seeing guys like Fields, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett get shipped out for less damage. Why are they so invested on this guy? On top of the three
So
injuries he's had.
yeah, I think part of it was he had that great 2022 season. And when I say great, obviously not great in the grand scheme of NFL quarterbacks, but it was a great season for Daniel Jones. It's the first time he was healthy. He played the full season. He led them on 5 game-winning drives. He helped them win a playoff game. So, he's coming off his best year ever as a Giant. And I think that the front office was like, okay, when he's healthy, this is what he can do. And his wide receiver is Richie James and Darius Slayton, who catches maybe 50% of the balls that are thrown his way. So I think their thinking was, well, we've seen what Daniel Jones can do with this very minimal amount of support around him. So if we build up the players around him, I think we can have a better Daniel Jones, and he'll improve based on what we saw in 2022. So I think that was their thought process. And I just think that they felt like, he had a good year. When he's healthy, this is what he can do. Assuming we can keep him healthy with an offensive line that can block him, then we should be in good shape. Obviously, that's not how 2023 went, but I think that was their thinking into re-signing him.
That first Dallas game was rough.
Oh, don't
Um,
remind
you see who ends up at the playoff or the championship game, Super Bowl. It's the Mahomes, it's the Burrows, it's the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I think any fan could admit Jones is nowhere near there.
me. Yeah.
At some point, do we have to transition from Jones to get a quarterback there? Because if you look, I don't know if you watch the quarterback Netflix special. The position of quarterback is changing drastically. It's really depending on what your quarterback can and can't do. Is how you limit your team's going to be. And
Mhm.
there's no disguising it this year because Saquon is gone. We don't know what their receiver core is going to look like. Our defense is in a vulnerable position. Do you want to see the Giants move on from Jones, or do you want to see the Giants keep investing in Jones?
I to me, this is potentially his last year unless he has a fantastic year. Because the theory is we brought in veteran offensive linemen who should be better. Like there's no excuse for that. And you bring in someone like Malik Neighbors, you draft Theo Johnson, you bring in Singletary. Like he's got the pieces around him in theory to make it work. So and he's already under contract. Like to me, it doesn't make any sense to sit him and play Drew Lock. You're
Yeah, he's
paying
playing this year. There's no doubting that he's playing. You're paying him $40 million.
exactly. Like I can't understand the people who are like, just bench him for Lock. I'm like, you're not going to pay him $38 million to sit on the bench. He's going to play, and if it doesn't work out this year, then we'll see about the future from there. But I also think that something everyone forgets is the 2022 off season. So 2023, after they win that playoff game, their draft pick is number, when did they draft Tay Banks? 25, or they moved down to 24. So at pick number 24, there's no quarterbacks available. The quarterbacks are available are maybe Will Levis, who didn't have a good year last year, got injured. So I'm trying to like also get people to understand that it doesn't, if they didn't re-sign Jones, what was our option at quarterback? It's not like there were a lot of really good veterans who are free agents. We didn't have a top 5 pick where we could have picked, one of those other quarterbacks. I mean, Matt Corral, there was all this talk about him. He's nowhere to be found. Kenny Pickett, not having a great year, all on a different team. Justin Fields. So I don't know. I'm fine with Daniel Jones as this year. If he has a fantastic year, then we go from there. But I'm like, he's under contract. Like I think the best thing for all of us is that Daniel Jones has an amazing year. He's already under contract. He's paying him. We got the offensive lineman. We got the wide receivers. Like he has a good year. We're all in good shape, except for the real Daniel Jones haters. But I want to win football games. So,
All right. It wouldn't be a Giants interview if we didn't talk about that O line.
oh God.
I don't know any other NFL team, college team that have struggled at the O line for the last 10 years more than I mean, they've been struggling since Eli. So
Yeah.
with the healthy Thompson, we don't know what Neil's going to really do because he's wishy-washy to me. We have two, like you said, Runya and Elman Noor coming back. JMS is in his second year. What is your hope for this offensive line?
I want them to be top 20 in the league. They were historically bad last year, that even if they're only 20% better, it's going to feel like they're one of the best lines in the league. But I don't want to have such low expectations for them. We brought in 2 veterans who are paying a lot of money. Evan Neal is a top 10 pick. We have a new offensive line coach. Like there just is no excuse for them not to be good. So I expect them to be way better this year than they were last year. And, last year we had third stringers playing. So the fact that they were historically bad, it probably shouldn't be that surprising to any of us. So I'm like, they just have to be a little bit better. That's it. I'd like to see them take it a step further, but if they're only a little bit better, especially in the beginning of the year, I think fans will be a little bit happy.
We talked about this in the beginning with Mink Martindale. He's now gone. Do you think
Yeah.
the Giants defense is vulnerable or in a better position? Because on one hand, the defense has to learn a whole new defensive strategy after 2 years with Martindale. On the other hand, we picked up Burns that makes 4 first-round picks on defense alone. So where do you think the defense is right now?
So I am way more optimistic on the defense than I am on the offense. The offense, I just still think there's too many moving pieces and too many question marks. The defense, we've seen what Dexter Lawrence can do. Nacho didn't get a whole lot of playing time last year, but when he did play, he was good. So I'm not really worried about him. Brian Burns, we know what he is. Kayvon, we know what he is. I think someone like Kayvon wasn't really used to his best potential in Wink's system. So I think that now having Burns on the other side of him versus someone like Aziz, who's never healthy, and Jihad Ward, who's not really getting after the quarterback that much, I think Burns is going to make Kayvon's play skyrocket. So I'm really excited about them. Bobby Okereke has been fantastic. Micah McFadden took a big step forward last year. Tay Banks is in year 2. So I feel like they're in a way better position this year than they were last year. And I think what I'm most curious about is how this system is going to benefit them, because I do think that Wink's system didn't necessarily benefit everyone. I think he made players fit into his scheme versus saying, this is the talent that we have on this team. We're going to utilize them to the best of their talent and use them in this type of scheme. Like the way that Shane Bowen talks, it sounds like he's going to be very versatile with them. Like, we're going to see a 3-4, we're going to see a 4-3, we're going to see them blitz a little bit here and there. So, where with Wink, it was, what they're doing every single time. They're blitzing. Maybe it's going to be, different types of blitzes, but it was always the same. So I don't know. I'm optimistic on them. Are you?
Um, I like you. I have more hope for the defense than I do for the offense. I'm
Yeah.
just concerned is that we did little to nothing for the secondary. We only picked up one in free agency and one in a draft, and that was a
Mhm.
big struggle. I mean, we ranked 20th in the league when it came to yards allowed. That's a big
Yeah.
problem. So I'm a little concerned about that part of the ball.
Yeah.
Switching back to the offense, Neighbors was picked at 6. What do you think Neighbors is going to bring to this offensive? I mean, this wide receiver core, because you have Hyatt, you have Slayton. They all have speed. What do you think is he going to be able to elevate out of them?
I think the biggest thing that Neighbors has is the athleticism and the contested catches, because we have not seen that from a lot of our players. Like, regardless of who the quarterback is, if they are throwing a jump ball, I have no confidence that any of our wide receivers or tight ends are catching it, because historically they have not been very good at it. So I feel like that's going to be the biggest thing. Like, if he's going up against a corner to catch that ball, I feel very confident that he's going to come down with it. Where in the past, I would say there's no one on our team besides Odell who I felt like was going to be able to do that. And I know there's a lot of comparisons going around between Neighbors and Odell, but when you look at the athleticism and the type of catches and the speed that Neighbors has, I do kind of think it's a fair comparison from a talent perspective. So I hope that that's what he can be for us, because he will immediately change this offense if that's what he can do.
Who do you see being the last? I think the Giants are going to usually go with their usual 6 to 7 receivers going into the season. Who do you think the 6 are going to be?
I feel the same way. So I think it's going to be Hyatt, Wandale, Neighbors, Slayton. I think Isaiah Hodgins is going to make it again. And then for my sixth one, I am torn between Bryce Ford Wheaton and who was I just thinking about? Isaiah McKenzie and Allen Robinson. Those are the three. Today I did see Allen Robinson. He was more with the threes. So I'm curious to see how that changes over camp. But I think if Bryce Ford Wheaton is fully healthy, I think he's going to have a really good shot to make this roster, because I think he has more of the speed and athleticism and he's young as compared to someone like Isaiah McKenzie or Allen Robinson.
Do you think Giants fans sometimes self-sabotage because
Oh my God.
be a player who's the couple games are great and we're ready throwing the ball, and then they just turn into nothing kind of. We have all this hype around this. I mean, look at Hodgins when he came over from Buffalo and he had that great couple games. Now he's
Mhm.
down to nothing. He's done nothing. Do you think the Giants sometimes self-sabotage? I mean, us as fans.
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think it's hard to say, because Isaiah Hodgins kind of came out of nowhere and had a great first year or two, and then he kind of fell off. And it's hard to say if it was because of that, or I also think now these other teams finally have film on him and they've seen the way that the Giants have used him. So maybe that's part of it. But I do, when Illuminor went down today, I already see Giants fans like going off the deep end. Like, that's it. We're gonna go 0-17. This offensive line is cursed, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, okay, he didn't break his leg. Like, let's take it one day at a time here. But it is frustrating. And, I was joking around with people like, we can't ever have nice things. Like, it is day one of camp, and our offensive lineman who hasn't missed a game in 2.5 years gets injured on the first day of practice. So it is frustrating.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw him, when I got the tweet that he went down, I'm like, are you kidding me? But it comes from the point of we have lost 9 out of 12 seasons. We have losing seasons 9 of 12. It's frustration at this point.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, everyone is just sick of losing, and I don't blame them. I'm right there with them. Like, that's why I'm like, I know everyone doesn't care that we didn't make it past the uh second round in the playoffs, but we have had such bad losing awful seasons that the fact that we went to the playoffs not that long ago is like, should
still,
be a little bit exciting. I know it doesn't make up for 9 other years of losing. But I guess it's better than 10 full years of losing.
we talked about this a little bit back. We saw, the Giants' secondary is clearly a problem or clearly a question. Do you
Yeah.
think they should have went out and got Sneed to help out the secondary, or are you fine with the drafting of neighbors?
I It's hard because they had so many holes. So I do feel like they made good decisions. I do wish that we had had more draft picks and more money, but I think based on the amount of money that they had and the draft picks, I think they did the best that we could do, because we do need a number one wide receiver. We do need someone who can rush the quarterback. So I feel like those are all priorities too. Um, I didn't really see them getting Sneed. I just felt like with the money and what he wanted, I didn't feel like there was any opportunity for us to get him. So I am curious with someone like what's his name? Justin Simmons, who's still available. I'm curious if they bring in someone like him, knowing that the secondary could probably still use a little bit of help.
Um, we all know in order to get to the playoffs, you need to get through the division. We have had losing seasons year after year with our division. That means we've been swept by the Cowboys twice. We barely made it past the Eagles that last game. I mean, are we in a position to be able to compete with these with Washington, Philadelphia, Dallas?
I do think we'll compete with Washington again. I know that Washington made some good moves this offseason, but they still have a rookie quarterback. They have a questionable offensive line. They traded away two of their best defensive players, and they have an entire new front office and coaching staff. And their coach is Dan Quinn, who's defensive minded. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Um, so I I think Washington, no question, we can compete with them again. Um, it's the Cowboys and Eagles, I do feel like are going to take a step back this year. The Eagles had some core players retire, and the Cowboys lost some good offensive linemen. They now have CeeDee Lamb, who's holding out of camp. They have Dak that they have to pay. They have Micah Parsons that they have to pay. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I also have no faith in Mike McCarthy or Sirianni. I don't think either one of them are good coaches anymore. So I think that is also going to play a very big part as to whether or not those teams succeed this year. So I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think we can win the division? No, not until I see this team actually play well on the field. If they do that, then maybe I would consider it. But I think until then, I think we're still looking at maybe tied for second place if we have a better season that I expect and everyone stays healthy, or we're looking at third in the division again. It's just going to be tough.
What do you think it's going to take to be able to? Because a lot of times, us Giants fans, we're like, let's get us to Walker, just get us to a Walker, just get us to a Walker. What is it going
Yeah.
to take for us to get past thinking, okay, let's get a Walker? How about us winning the division? We have not won since 2011. No team has repeated in the NFC East, and we're not even in the mix for the last 6 years. What is it going to take for the Giants to be able to win this division?
Um, I the biggest thing is health. If everyone is healthy this year, there is no reason why this team should not win 9 games. There's just no excuse. Like, I don't want to hear it from anyone. If if they're not healthy, it's a different story. Health plays such a big factor into this team. I think the depth has improved, but if Illuminor can't play week one, I really don't feel good about having Joshua Azudu or Evan Neal as our right tackle. Like, I absolutely do not want to go into week one as our scenario. So I think health is the biggest thing. Outside of that, I think it probably would be the quarterback play. So if everything is going well around Daniel Jones, again, there's no excuse to see a better Daniel Jones than we saw from 2022. There are things that he is capable of doing, things that he is capable of improving on. And, in year 6, you have to do it, especially when you've got the better help around you. So it's going to be interesting.
How much faith do you think? Because Daboll's came from Josh Allen, that whole Buffalo Bill organization. He kind of just got dumped, Daniel Jones. He didn't get to handpick his quarterback or kind of mold him into the one he is. You
Yeah.
see how they talk about Daniel Jones in Hard Knocks. It's like 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door with him. What do you think Daboll's is going to have to do in order to get the best quarterback out of Jones? Because clearly there's some type of miscue between the both of them. They're not seeing each other.
Yeah, I think so. From what I've heard about Dable's offensive scheme, it is one of the hardest to learn in the league. So, and I had this conversation a little bit with Alex Rollins the other day when we were talking about it, saying that, like, if it's obvious that your players are struggling, I think you need to spend more one-on-one time with them and maybe scale it back a little bit. Like when we saw, in some of the tape that he reviewed from last season, I mean, Jalen Hyatt is running the wrong route a couple times. So when your quarterback is doing the right thing and your wide receiver, who's your first read, is not open and your offensive line is collapsing in, you don't have enough time to look to see who's open. So I think that's part of it. So I think if that's the case with Jones, then he needs to work on that with him. And I think that he also has to he has to do whatever it takes to make it work with Jones. So I don't know, what the biggest issue is. And I am not, an expert when it comes to training quarterbacks and what they can improve on versus what they can improve on. Like, we know that Jones has typically been slower to get to his second read. Is it all based on the offensive line? Is it the fact that he doesn't have time? Is it just something that he's slower at processing? Like, is there something that Dable can be teaching him to help him improve that? I don't know. But if there is, like, these are the things that I think Dable should be doing with him. And
You,
maybe he is, but that's what I would like to see him do if it's possible.
you brought up a great point about receivers running the wrong route. That's been an issue since Eli. Because do you remember? I'm blanking on their name, but it was Cruz, um,
Nick.
Knicks, and that crew. It was the same issue. Receivers wrong in the wrong route, and then Eli fumbling or running for his life. Is there a lack of lack of discipline that's going on with the Giants that they can't get a hold of? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Or it looks like.
Yeah. What's interesting though is and maybe we'll never know this, but it sounds like it's not a defensive problem. Like, we don't hear from players, or, I haven't seen it on film where, analysts are saying, like, Dexter was in the wrong position or Kayvon should have been doing this. So, we've seen sometimes where some of the outside corners have been a little bit slow to catch up, but I think that's more of them just not having the speed versus anything else. So, even we heard last year, like, there were a lot of miscommunications with the offensive line. It's not being talked about with the defense. So maybe it is, and that's not something that we know about, but there's has to be some sort of communication issue, something that's going on there. But we've had a million different coaches. Like, someone has to figure out the communication issue.
Keeping on the topic of quarterback, let's get into DeVito a little bit because he showed some promise being an undrafted quarterback. I think a lot of people thought if you Jones isn't ready, put DeVito in, or at some point it was talk about sitting Jones out and putting DeVito in, which would never work. To me, do you
Yeah.
think DeVito has potential to be the primary second QB? Because they went out and got Locke, which was a little interesting because DeVito did have a pretty good decent season for what he was thrown with. Do you think DeVito
Yeah.
has the ability to be that guy?
I think he could be. I think he's just young, and because he was an undrafted free agent, I feel like maybe the Giants felt like he didn't have enough experience under his belt to be the backup in case Jones went down. But I do think that he has some great qualities at quarterback. He seems to stay cool, calm, collected when everything around him is going wrong. And, he won a few games last year. So I think he's got some good things going for him. And I would like to see him improve. And I do have that question as well that, Drew Lock is only on a 1 year deal. So let's assume that this time next year, they still have Daniel Jones. Is at that point Tommy DeVito number two, and then someone else is the third string versus, getting another veteran like Drew Lock or whatever, if DeVito's about to be in his third year. So I think it could be a possibility. But I like DeVito and I want to continue to see him improve because I think he's a great Giant and a great guy. I know he's so funny. I love the whole thing around him. I saw his parents today and I was like, they're great.
You know what? Speaking of him, that was such a relief for that team. Everything was going wrong, and to have him kind of take on that, just take on that energy and just lighten up the Giant season with the whole little that or the typical Jersey Italian family. It was fun, so I like seeing him as well.
Yeah, I agree. And the people who are like, we could have had XYZ if we didn't win those couple games. I'm like, you have to understand something like that to me says more about the players and the fact that they didn't want to give up on their coach, where we have seen players do that in the past. So I think that says a lot about Dable, the fact that the players wanted to keep playing for them. And, you know, whether you win 4 games or 6 games, I mean, every win I think counts, especially when it's against the Eagles, week 18.
Um, we've talked about this. We've seen Jerry Reese, we've seen Dave Gettleman, we're in the Joe era. We've seen Pat Shermer, Ben McAdoo, Joe Judge. We've seen so many coordinators, so many variation of this O line.
Mm.
What point do we hold the owners responsible, specifically John Mayer, for this team?
Yeah, I I think you have to he deserves to be criticized for making poor decisions. And that includes bringing back Dave Gettleman. That includes the hiring of Pat Shermer and Joe Judge. I think what's hard to figure out is how much Steve Tisch is involved, because I do think that Mara runs the bulk of it. And I think that, Tisch voices his opinion, but I think ultimately Mara makes the final decision. But, the thing that I say too in defense of John Mara is he also hired a Corsi and Tom Coughlin, who, brought us 2 Super Bowls. So it's not like he has a trajectory of being the owner and we've lost every single game for, since him being the owner. Like we did win a couple Super Bowls here. So I just think, like, yes, he's made some poor decisions. Bringing back Dave Gettleman will probably go down as the worst decision in Giants history. So definitely deserves criticism for that.
You were at camp today. What was something that you saw that gave you a glimpse of, okay, I can see this improving?
Um
Area,
I
did you?
I did feel good about the way that the quarterbacks, like some of them started off a little bit slow, Jones included. And I felt like as it went on, like he was moving really well. The grass was slippery, and the way that he was able to dig in and still cut and make good moves, I was like, okay, I feel like he is fully healed and he's good to go. All the quarterbacks made some mistakes today. It's the first day out, so I'm not gonna overreact and say we're gonna go 0-17 because it wasn't the best day ever. But I do feel like, it's day one. I think we're gonna continue to see them improve. I saw Neighbors make some good catches. I saw Eric Gray have some good catches. So, again, assuming the offensive line holds up, I do think the offense could be good.
I'm sure you looked at the schedule as I did. Who are you most excited to play?
I am excited about a lot of games. I think the Browns game is one that's going to be very challenging for the Giants, but I also don't have any faith in Deshaun Watson. So I think that, if by the time we play the Browns, this Giants offense is rolling, let's say, we're 2-1 going into that game, I feel good about it. I feel like that game is going to be very pivotal into how this season goes because there's an opportunity for them to be 2-1 at that point. Best case scenario, they're 3-0 and they beat the Cowboys week 3, but I won't get that excited just yet. But that could be a pivotal point for the first time in a while going, 3-1 versus 2-2, which I don't think 2-2 would be the end of the world, but I just feel like that could be a good game for them. Good turning point game.
How confident are you in Gano? Because last season we saw him struggle, and we are all trying to figure out what's going on, and then finally the injury came out. Are you confident that he's fully healed and ready to go?
Yes, I saw him at camp today. He looked great. And he was one of the players who got surgery, I think, a little bit earlier in the season versus someone like Neil. So I do think that he looks like he's good to go. I think he's going to be totally fine.
All right. Speaking of Neil, I know you said he's a first round pick, and I don't have confidence in him for some reason. We've seen these first round draft pick with this offensive line. They've gone wrong so many times. I mean, you look at Eric
Yeah.
Flowers, you look at Neil Thomas. He got hurt a lot last year, was out a lot. How confident are you in Neil?
I gotta tell you, my confidence in him goes down by the day. I am still optimistic on him because I want it to work. The best case scenario for the Giants is that our seventh overall pick gets his butt together and plays well. I mean, if he's playing well, then that means we're in good shape. So to me, that's the best case scenario. And I always want to root for that. But the fact that he had a setback and is starting the season he's listed as on the pup right now, I know there's nothing he can do about it. It's just another like kind of stain on his career at this point, right? Like he needs every snap he can get. He needs all the practice under his belt before week 1. And I'm just like, oh, I just wanted him to be ready to go to get that.
All right, let's get into your channel a little bit. What was it like for you? What is it like for you hosting this new community of Giants fan every day? They're all tuning into your lives or commenting on your posts. What is it like hosting something like this?
It's a blessing and a curse because I always say like this is the point in the season where I'm optimistic because the team is not 0-2 and everyone's injured at this point. So I want to be optimistic until they prove to me that I shouldn't be optimistic. So there's a lot of fans who feel like I do, who are excited about the upcoming season. They like the offseason moves. So it's been really fun to converse with a lot of other Giants fans and just kind of see where people's heads are at. But it's also been a curse because there are just some people who are so negative and are like, with this person doing this and this person doing this and this person in the quarterback, and this is our owner, we're never going to win another game and they need to fire everyone and sell the team. And I'm just like, I am exhausted listening to you because none of those things are going to happen. So like I mean maybe I'm going to win the lottery. This is like not reality though. So let's live in the world where we're at where John Mara is the owner and Daniel Jones is the quarterback and we brought in veteran offensive linemen and like let's just hope it's going to work. And if it doesn't work then you can go cry about it. But until then, be a little excited.
All right, last question to wrap up the Giants. What is your final prediction for them? What is their record going to look like?
If they are healthy, which to me is the number one deciding factor as to whether or not this team wins or loses games, they should go 9-8, no exception. Ideally, I'd like to see them be better than that, but I thought they were going to go 11-6 last year, so I'm gonna take the under this year and not be as overly optimistic until I see them prove to me that they're actually the team that I hope they are, if not better.
All right. Now, it
What do
was
you?
me. I'm right with you at 9-8. I see some teams we can beat, and I'm seeing some teams that up in the air. Like I'm really questioning the Pittsburgh game. I'm like, what is that going to look like?
Yep.
I'm concerned about the NFC East. I know Washington, we usually split that game 1-1, but then can we compete with the Eagles? Can we compete with Dallas? They have all these question marks. So I'm with
Yeah.
you. I'm about a 9-8 because I at least see us losing majority of our games in our own division, and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Hmm.
Alrighty. I always do this bonus question, like my last question for my guest. What is somewhere, well, you're from Jersey, somewhere in Jersey that everyone should go try out? Restaurant, bar, park,
Ooh.
beach. What is that one spot in Jersey?
Okay, I have three. So the town that I grew up in Ramsey, B&B Bagels. I actually think they changed their name and I don't know what it is, but it used to be B&B Bagels. It's on Main Street in Ramsey. Hands down, the best bagels, the best breakfast sandwiches, must get, so good. Their pumpernickel bagel is my favorite. They have Taylor ham, egg and cheese on an everything bagel. Just they're the best. Somewhere else that's also in Ramsey, but it's on Route 17 is State Line Diner. You cannot go wrong with a diner in New Jersey, but State Line is the one that I grew up going to. They have the best honey mustard sauce. Everything I've had there is good. So it's the best. And then last up is my favorite beach is Beach Haven in LBI. I am headed there next weekend and I'm so excited. It is just my favorite place to be. And if you're in Jersey and you can get there, you must.
Alrighty. Thank you so much for your time and doing this interview with me. I had a lot of fun doing it. You guys can follow Adriana on Instagram at New York Giant Fangirl. And you can check out our podcast, Everything New York Giants, which is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. As always, you guys can follow me on Instagram at Tell Me All About It. And starting this episode, you guys can now find me on Spotify. So check that out. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. Go Giants.
Go Giants. Alrighty. I'm going to end this.